gave us $200,000 towards the cost of the replacement of that boiler. If we didn't have that money, that line would be much higher. But that was, I really appreciate Mike and the town council providing that funding for us. So it keeps Greg's budget down quite a bit. Almost every other account he has is at the same amount as last year. Staff and student support, this is the money we budget for the professional improvement of teachers, administrators, and our support staff, and we're recommending the same amount of funding as last year. We also budget for our student support teams in those accounts. Volunteer services, it's a whopping $690 that we provide in funding for that. I mean, you want to talk about return on investment, I think that's one of the accounts that we get a tremendous return on investment. We have over 900 volunteers that Gail organizes, and they provide over 22,000 hours of service. So that's a tremendous assistance to the school system. Health services, the account that Mary was asking about, the nurses, besides their salaries, use about $10,000 to run their programs, and we're recommending the same amount for next year. Transportation is pretty level also, but again, we have two things in the transportation budget that really are causing that to increase $21,471. The diesel fuel is about $15,000 of that. And each year, we buy a new bus, and we retire a bus. It's a great way of keeping the fleet modern. And if you get behind in the replacement of a bus, that means you've got to replace 3 or 4 at one time, and that's not a good way to manage that. So the new bus is going to cost us about $5,000 or $6,000 extra, so that's why that account is up $21,000. Instructional support, if you take all the salaries out of that, spending $237,100, that account is up $96,200. Part of that is for contracted services that we received in different federal stimulus money. It's not new money, but we used the special federal stimulus money to fund contracted services. And the other part of that increase, it's about $40-something thousand, is for an out-of-district tuition that we did not anticipate. We're actually funding that this year, so we'll need to continue funding it next year. Athletics is up about $18,000. Most of that is to increase the hours for the trainer. We're over budget almost every year on that line item, so we're trying to get closer to what we're actually spending. I think we budget around 15 and we're spending more like 25. Jeff's got the exact numbers for you. And the other part of that increase, we've got to get back on our uniform replacement schedule. If we fall too far behind in that, you're going to be faced with a major expenditures to replace uniforms. And Jeff has a 5-year uniform replacement schedule that needs a boost to get back on track. So that's why that's up. Good news about debt service, it's down $34,000. Technology, Gary's area, is a little bit less than last year, $2,000 less. Contingency is a big decrease. Last year, as we got near the end of the budget season, the state gave us $300,000 extra, more than what we were anticipating, and the school board put that into contingency. This year, we're reverting back to our historic contingency account, which is $70,000. I think when times get better, and they will eventually, you really need to increase that line item. That represents less than 0.5%. And for a $21 million budget, to have a $70,000 contingency, really isn't enough. For example, we've got a water heater at the middle school that we didn't anticipate having to spend money on, but that's going to be almost $70,000 And so that would eat up a whole contingency fund, and you just can't be that precise. You know, we're what, 15 months away from when we're going to be spending this money, so 0.5% in contingency is really skinny. But, you know, this is not the economic climate to try to do a whole lot when you're trying to bring in a skinny budget. So the total, if you look at that last column, we're up 447,719, the one on the far right. And it shows, you know, we're up 1.3. It's because this federal stimulus money was nice, but it's gone and it's not coming back. So let's just take a look at the budget summary quickly, and we'll turn it over to the principals and others. Total expenditure budget, as I reviewed, is up 2.2%. Revenues, there's some good news in revenues. You know, we learned last week that, you know, if the governor's budget prevails, Cape Elizabeth is going to receive $344,000 more than what we did last year. So that's real good news. And that number might change, you know, because the legislature hasn't voted on a budget yet. But right now, that's the number they've provided, and that certainly is good news. Bad news? You know, losing the federal stimulus money, that's the $925,000 that's going away. But some more good news. Last year we received $452,524, and the school board knew they had that $925,000 disappearing, so we haven't spent that money. So that can be used to offset, you know, the loss of the federal stimulus money. So combined, you know, the extra money from the state and the money that the school board last year knew that they would, that we would have to use for this year, it helps offset that $925,000. We have some other revenues. We have an undesignated fund balance. At the end of the year, whatever we have left over goes into that undesignated fund balance. And during good times, that balance grows, and during times like this, it gets pretty low, but we still think we'll have $250,000 that we can use, which is the amount historically that we've used. We have some other revenue. We have a pay-to-play athletic policy, and that brings in, I think, about $45,000 each year. And we have parking fees at the high school, which brings in an additional $8,000, so that's $53,000. State agency clients, these are students for one reason or another that the state has custody, and if they live in Cape Elizabeth and require special education services, the state will reimburse us for those. Those monies are down a little bit because one of our students is graduating. Medicaid, Don does a great job of chasing that money. There are certain services that special ed students require that are reimbursed by the state and federal government. Medicaid, that money is going away, but we're sitting on about $400,000 of Medicaid money right now. We're not recommending that you use that money this year because next year, that $452,000 that you see up there that the school board didn't spend, that goes away. So we've really got a 2-year problem that we're trying to manage with this federal stimulus money. So our suggestion would be not to use the Medicaid money this year, but to use it next year to offset that $452,000 that you see up there. See, that disappears next year. That's going to be the problem. This year, it's the $925 that's the problem, but next year, it's the $452 that's going to be the problem. So if you use the Medicaid money next year, you won't, you know, property taxpayers are not going to be faced with a huge property increase either. And we'll go over a 3-year plan with you at a subsequent workshop, but I just wanted to let you know our thinking. You may disagree and say, let's use the Medicaid money and use it all this year, and you know, you could really be heroes this year, but I don't know what you do next year. So the revenues total, we're down about 8% in revenue. It's nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. That extra state funding really helps tremendously. And the fact that the school board had that foresight not to get liberal with the 452,000, but rather preserve it was real smart also. So again, just to repeat, the median price home, and I know some people would probably quarrel that's the median price home in Cape Elizabeth, but that's what the assessor tells us is the median price home, so we'll run with that number. 253,800. That person is paying $4,532.87 in property taxes, and this budget means they would be paying $85.19 more, or about 1.9%. So that's the school funding history. And trying to develop a budget based on that number would be just plain silly, because there's no consistency to that number. That's our history. I mean, some years it's been good, and other years it's been bad. What would be wonderful, but it's probably not going to happen for a few years, is to get back on what a consistent amount you could expect from the state. But you can see the swing there is as much as over $1 million. And I know a lot of school systems do try to develop their budgets around state funding, but it doesn't make much sense to do that because you've got these tremendous highs and these tremendous lows. To me, it makes much more sense to be a little bit more even about how you're going about developing budgets. Plus, you've got no control over Augusta. You do have control over the expenditure side of the budget. You've got tremendous control over that. So, I'll be glad to take any questions you might have about my presentation, but you might want to get right into the presentations from the principals and other district leaders. Anything you have for me?
One thing. Our page 2 does not match the 1.9 number that is on the slide. Maybe that was updated. Maybe that was something you updated. Or...
Yeah, that's accurate. That's just the education portion.
Okay.
But if you take that and spread it out over the entire community, it becomes less.
Okay. Okay.
So in other words, 1.9 is net to taxes?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
In your book, it says 2.6, but that's just the education portion.
So this is net to tax.
Right. Because if you notice, we only have this person paying $3,000 in property taxes, when in fact they're paying, $4,000
Right.
something.
This is the town portion.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
Okay,
but-
sorry. Got it. Anyone else?
Any other questions like that? Thanks for pointing that out. Tom? First one, as always.
You have the fund vote summary in your book, so if you haven't read it before, you can read along. I hope to make this more interactive than that and follow up on the recommendations. Chris, I chose 3 highlights, and I just wanted to use this opportunity to explain my rationale for that. The first one, and maybe amplify it a little bit. And my real reason for doing that is to show you how your work developing budget numbers results in improvement in the schools. The first is the K-5 Literacy Task Force, which you've heard about. In fact, Kate is on the committee who reported to you in November. The reason I chose that is in the budget there are funds continuing for professional development for the staff, even in tight budget times. That has had quite an effect throughout Pontotoc and I think the whole district. And Jim Collins in Good to Great calls that a flywheel effect. And I think that's exactly what happened with the Literacy Task Force. It's a small but very important project, and its energy has helped stabilize a lot of school improvement efforts at Pontotoc. The second one is more work done with CIA. In this case, it's the revamped and successful implementation of the guidance curriculum. And I wanted to thank you for the modifications you made in personnel last year. Now that we have a new social worker in regular education and still have a full-time guidance person, they hit the ground running in August, and they've energized the entire school with their work. they sorted out the roles